All right, better late than never, but it's finally time to talk about the Scream 6 trailer. Okay, so for me, as far as just right off the bat, just to jump right on into it, for me, as far as trailers go, it's definitely a very solid trailer, I would say, as far as the execution, as far as setting the tone, as far as the dialogue given, particularly from Ghostface and stuff like that, where he's speaking to Gale, where he's like, maybe, but you never seen one like me, Gale. And it's just stuff like that, and it's very intriguing. And of course, even moments when you see the shrine and all that stuff, you see all the what because I've been listening to a bunch of videos and such, and like, what is the shrine representing here? Is it some tucked away like little area where they've collected like all this either crime stuff and or memorabilia like replicas from like some of the movies or something, or is this actually some type of like little, because they do have legit museums for like criminals and stuff, like they have those types of things. Is it like some little exhibit type of deal? What is it? We don't really know 100%. uh and so the intrigue is there, just the setup of it all, what they're building up. I find it to be rather fascinating. Now, how did you feel about the trailer itself, as far as what it was giving you?
I definitely liked the bit in the train that we originally saw in the teaser.
Mm-hmm.
That was like an oh shit kind of thing. Like, oh, dude, there's like a bunch of them, and then
Mm-hmm.
the one that comes right up.
Yeah.
Um, and then like you were mentioning the shrine thing, I was like, what? Like
Mm.
literally, that was my reaction. Like, what is
Yeah.
this? And then the whole, like you had also said that the interaction with Gail, I thought that part was pretty badass. Him
Mm-hmm.
doing the knife thing, like that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as like that train sequence in particular, now even when I first saw the teaser trailer, I had one particular notion in my head that where, yeah, a lot of us are thinking, could this potentially be some sort of cult or a mini cult, if you will? Like, maybe are there three ghost faces? And I feel like maybe that could still potentially be true. We'll see. I was thinking though, is that I wonder if that's like a way to play with expectations, is because we see on the train it's some type of, I guess, some type of Halloween party going on, because you see all these other characters and stuff dressed up and such. I wonder if one of them may actually be Ghostface, but maybe like another two of them aren't. Like two people who happen to be dressed up as Ghostface, and they're just looking and maybe recognize them, and they're just kind of fucking with them. Like, I can imagine that being something, and just a way to play with expectations on that. So I feel like that could be a possibility as far as like that moment goes. That's just an idea that I
That
had.
makes sense.
Yeah, I could see that potentially being the case, but I guess we'll see. And so, yeah, and knowing what happened with the last film, again, for me, I about 90% enjoyed it. I just felt like the reveals of those ones, of course, spoilers, Richie and Amber in particular, while the performances were there, I still felt like, I don't know. I still don't know if I'm completely sold on the motive stuff with them, and I don't, especially with Amber, I felt like she was probably just perhaps, because it felt very rushed at the end, and it felt like you got time to really, let them breathe a bit. Because usually with most of the Scream movies, when you get the reveal, you kind of let that breathe a little bit. You know what I mean? To kind of, get into their psyche a little bit more. With them, it just felt like they felt a little two dimensional. Like, with Amber in particular, it felt like. And unlike Jill, where Jill, yeah, she was like, yeah, a smaller girl, scrappy, but she had a certain edge to her, if you will. You know what I mean? So she had, especially since that hospital sequence, you
Yeah,
had a
that
lot
was
more
that was pretty
going with
cool.
her, and so that's why I just felt like they were lackluster compared. Like, I would put them basically within the bottom two or three Ghost Faces, and that's why I felt like, I don't know. And the motives, just I just don't think it was good enough for what, for, because if we're gonna go past Wes Craven's work, you gotta make it worthwhile for me, if you ask me, and that's just how I see it. But in this day and age, knowing how we build up films more, like we always have a trilogy planned, even though they may have said, oh, we didn't really plan a trilogy, we wanted to do the first one, maybe see how it did. They had to have had some sort of outline, some sense of direction where they were going to go. And so, you had to build up on something. And so that's why I feel like there has to be some closer ties with those characters as well, like the original Scream 3 did, kind of tying things back to the original and kind of going forward from there. And so this is why I feel like, especially with the poster now, with the poster that we've noticed
The
all the
train
names, yeah,
lines.
all the
Yeah,
different
that was cool.
characters and stuff. Kirby says closed because she was alive, but all these dead characters and basically all leading up to Sam. And of course, they did put, of course, not by mistake, that Stu's dot was like a white pink, like a little bit of red in it. And so that does make you question. Now, I had the notion that I could see them utilizing Stu as a way to tie things together. Do I necessarily believe that they'll do that? Honestly, I don't really believe that they will. It's probably more keen to what Dave was saying. Dave McCrae's theory is that it could be his son, maybe at least as part of it in some way, shape, or form, along with whoever else is Ghostface. Because to me, I again going off the notion that there, especially the way that they're building this up. Oh, you've never seen one like Miguel, and even literally the line, which I think is from Kirby. This isn't like any other Ghostface. Okay, in what way, shape, or form is that? Is that some subversion of expectations? What is different about this Ghostface? Are they a returning character? Are they a past survivor? Are they a past killer? What's different about them? What do you think as far as that goes? Like, what do you think they're trying to go for here? Do you have
Well,
any inkling what you
I
think
mean,
it could
the
be?
only thing I guess that would work. I mean, I guess a bunch of things could work, but maybe fudge. Because I mean, obviously, it's always been like an inside job, like within the group of friends.
Yeah.
So it's not, it doesn't really matter if it's something like that. So something not like me, okay. Um, I don't
And
know.
not to mention the fact that also we do see the weathered ghost face mask.
That's
Like they're
cool.
doing with Halloween 2018. It's a lot like that. And so, okay, what does that mean? Why are they using that mask specifically, not just a fresh mask? That begs a lot of questions as well. What does this all really tie into? And again, so I feel like, and as a lot of people are starting to suggest now, is that the idea that a ghost face potentially gets away, which I just like that idea in general. Again, it's adding something a little bit different and then leave some intrigue going into the next one and building up like a new Ghostface. So even if you reveal one or two killers in this one, you're setting yourself up for some more intrigue going into that one. Now, whether
Yeah,
that,
like the dude that gets away, dude or dudette, I
yeah,
guess, is the ringleader and the two peons got caught, or whatever. So,
yeah. So you could and again, this is what I'm talking about because again, there's a lot of debate. People will either love or hate the idea of Stu coming back or not coming back, or
I'd be
if
cool with
that's
that. That'd
or
be
if that's
interesting.
jumping the shark. But again, see, my main point is that considering where we left ourselves last time with the fifth movie, I feel like we're already kind of on shaky ground as it is because for what they gave
Because they
us
killed
there,
Dewey.
they
Come
just
on.
yeah, there's that, which again, and considering someone like me who can be very particular about that sort of thing, a lot of people even say that maybe he went out in a bad way, which I can completely understand. I felt like the setup for it, the lighting, the line deliveries, and even the execute, like the stabbing of the front and the back thing,
Oh,
kind of harkening back to what even like what Stu said in the original, where he's just like you take a knife, you gut them from sternum to growing and this and that. And it's just like the way it was done. I felt like,
that,
especially with Dewey, yeah,
yeah.
it's rough to see, but the setup of the scene itself, again, I can't necessarily hate on. But and the reason I particularly, and I'm trying to be reasonable, so just hear me out, is that the reason why I don't really care for that being Amber is because yeah, first of all, it's like yeah, not necessarily because she's just a smaller character. Again, we got Jill, but Jill had a little bit more going for her, especially when you see the way that she treated herself at the end of that film. Jill had no fucking fear. Like she would throw herself off a fucking cliff if it meant her getting away. That's why because she just had a little bit more just something going for her, where Amber just felt a little bit more two dimensional.
She
And
just
not
felt like a little
and not
puppy
only that
dog.
is because it's like okay, if you kill a legacy character like that, I feel like again, it's
Takes a
depend.
legacy character to kill a
It
legacy character.
that's kind of what I mean. It's like, okay, if you do that, it's how you do it, when you do it, and by who.
The line that
There's a
he
lot.
says too.
It's an yeah. I mean, you could take it many ways, but I just feel like also, and again, it doesn't have to be stupid, but I feel like it adds a nice layer if whoever they potentially are building up as Ghostface in this, and if they were to get away at the end of the next film, to say that that was somebody else, I think it just adds an extra layer. And to also say that Richie and Amber were lackeys of some sort, I feel like that would have me add a little bit more forgiveness to their lackluster kind of motive and or execution, and adds a little something more to show. Be like, okay, I can kind of see where you were going with there if they had someone they were more influencing them or groom them to push
Well,
them into that, since they were already overly obsessed fans.
didn't
If
they meet
somebody
on
could,
some chat board or
well, yeah, I
something?
mean, they even did that with Mickey
So,
back in Scream 2 with Mrs. Loomis being like, "Oh yeah, just search for serial
well,
killers online." It is like that, especially in this day and
so
age with the internet being as
it
intricate
stands
as
to
it is.
reason that,
And that's what I mean, though. I just feel like that's a way to
yeah.
kind of save it to where I felt like they were genuinely a bit lackluster. You know what I mean? I just felt like
Hmm.
there just wasn't enough there. And even the idea that, the reason, again, I've held on to Stu, or at least if it was his son, I could see that that's a way to kind of meet halfway. It's also because, too, it's more jumping the shark if you keep adding these new characters that we haven't seen before. It's like, even if they do have a good reason, and say even if maybe Gale is a little bit more of the center focus, which she is, because you know Nev isn't necessarily involved, could they technically have had added a last minute maybe post credit scene? Maybe I could see the reports coming in after this one and say, oh yeah, she is coming back for Scream 7 to give her one last hurrah, whatever. But again, my main point is that it's more jumping the shark when you keep adding these new people with new motives, especially when we know for a fact that everything has harkened back to both Sydney and her family, her mother, from basically the first four films, even the last one, halfway, considering that some of it was about Sam. And so when you just suddenly kind of shift focus to these new, I understand it's like passing the torch, but at the same time, if you want to talk about realism, how's it any more realistic when you keep having so many different people who are just acting on their own accord, putting on the Ghostface costume, and now, even though everything has stemmed from Sydney and her family, now all of a sudden it's about Sam. I mean, that's just how I'm seeing it, and so therefore, I feel like you have to find a way to tie in both generations, to find a
Yeah.
way to, like I said, if you went back and say, especially if this Ghostface is as badass as they claim to be, imagine if they were, because they were probably going to want to be more hands on. If you're going to kill off a character like Dewey, it's like, no, motherfucker, you guys aren't doing that. I want that kill for myself. In this one, the way I see it, because I felt like Dewey was going to die in the last one as it was, it felt like another Han Solo, to be honest. As far as him being the central focus and being a legacy character, I'm like, I had a feeling that was going to happen. This one, I'm more than willing to bet Gil's gonna bite the dust in this one, because if you already killed Dewey, you can technically afford to kill Gale. Sydney again is the one in particular, as I've said, because she's been the survivor and she has kids now. Even if you brought her back for 7, killing her would be definitely a step too far. And a lot of people, again, already feel bad about Dewey, which I completely understand, but you've already gone there. And so that's what I mean. They're going to want to take those kills for themselves. At least that's how I see it. That's a way to do it.
Well, I mean, I could totally see trying you what you're saying about tying them together, the legacy and these new people. I mean, it makes sense that at least some kind of legacy character, or like Sam legacy by proxy, technically speaking, because daughter. So, I mean, it's not really that
I
far
mean,
of a
yeah, and because
stretch.
they've already gone out of their way, especially since I already thought it was a little bit odd to begin with, that knowing that Sam is seeing visions of her dead father that she never actually met. It's like, yeah, maybe she saw, pictures online from stories or whatnot, and of course the films, just seeing that representation of him. But she's literally seeing visions of her dead father that she never met from the climax of Scream, because he got the white shirt, he's bloodied up. Is that not already a bit weird in and of itself? They've already gone that far with it. So, I mean, just to say that you couldn't have another close tie, like, yeah, if it was, say, Stu's son, it's kind of on opposite end, which they kind of done before. I could kind of maybe see that, but I just feel like even if it's not that, it, I feel like you have to kind of build yourself up for something that kind of ties everything together in some way, shape, or form. If the new killers are seemingly a bit too random, even if they maybe have good motives and it kind of works in its own right, if it still doesn't really maybe play into some sort of bigger picture to where it kind of fits into both Sam and Sydney's life, it's just going to seem a bit off to me because, as I've said, everything has harkened back to both Sydney and her mother and her past. And then suddenly shift. Now you got all these other people wanting to fuck around with Sam and her and Tara and all these other people. I'm like, well, that's stretching it a bit further than just, yeah, I guess a fucking TV to the head. That's just how I look at it, though. Because they've already jumped in the shark by going past Scream 4 doing all this. So you're going to have to kind of really bring it and find a way to strike that balance of the old and the new and, just build up a ghost face, but find a way to tie things together. That's just how I look at it, though. So, I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but again, I'm just trying to find a happy medium here as far as not getting too far away, but at the same time, yeah, find a way to freshen things up a bit. But yeah, because if you've had someone maybe say over time that's actually groomed people to make them more of these types of people to want to follow along, especially when you're dealing with obsessed fans and this and that, to have someone to kind of follow in some way, shape, or form. That just to me makes a little bit more sense than people mostly just wanting to act on their own accord and doing all these killings. You know what I mean? That's just how I look at it. So, any other feelings or
The bodega sequence was pretty awesome too.
yeah, yeah. And I know people already kind of complaining about Ghostface having a gun. I'm like, well, I'm also again a bit of a purist when it comes to a lot of things, but I mean, once Ghostface is always revealed, they basically switch from a knife to a handgun or both. I mean, so Ghostface
Well,
himself,
yeah, obviously the
so
last
Ghostface,
movie.
so Ghostface himself just holding a gun. I'm just like, well, at least a shotgun for like a brief period of time in the boat day. I'm like, that doesn't really bother me that much. I don't think that's not like I don't know Freddy switching his claws for a cheese grater. I don't know. Like I don't see that as like that big of a discrepancy with like the lore. I'm like, nah,
Well, he
that's
kind of could turn himself into anything he wanted anyway. So,
especially the way that
but
they handled the scene. I'm like, yeah. And there's the idea that yeah,
it's
how
the closest weapon. Like,
and there's the
you
idea
know,
that this Ghostface, obviously, from what you can see in the trailer, is rather tactical and probably a little bit more badass. And from what we can confirm now, because I don't know if you really know, is that we know that Kirby is basically a cop in this. I don't know if I think she's FBI, maybe. So she's some sort of law enforcement. So I don't know, maybe she could be one of the killers potentially. That's a possibility, perhaps. And I don't know. I guess we'll see where they go because I've heard every theory under the sun at this point. So it's probably a mishmash of whatever the fuck. But I mean, yeah, so it does leave a lot of intrigue where things can go. Again, I hope they find a way to tie things in an interesting fashion because you're in a position where now where you don't need Sydney for this one, and you can have ways to tie in some interesting angles to the previous film. And yeah, I don't know. I just don't want it to seem too random. And if you want to talk about a TV to the head as well, I'm like, well, Amber got shot like probably about 3 or 4 times in the chest. She caught on fire, and then considering the trauma that she would have taken, her ass got back up pretty fucking quickly just to sprint across the room to try to stab the motherfucker before she got shot in the head. And I'm just like, well, I mean, again, it's a little bit more believable if you ask me. If
I
he
still prefer the Babadook.
if he came back from that, then as opposed to just all these people just taking up that mantle on their own without at least some closer ties to Sydney and Sam to some extent. Like I said, I could see his son and that kind of being like a happy medium, as well as a couple other people working with him or underneath him. Maybe I don't know. Again, I don't know. They could do anything. I'm just saying like I feel like that there's there's room there to find a way to tie everything in as best as possible. And so that's just my reasoning for a lot of it. It's not just looking to have some nostalgia trip necessarily. I'm just like, okay, well, again, logically speaking, if you stretch this out any further, then it would make more sense to at least try to have someone who has a close tie to the past, who we know is capable of doing this, or at least we know who's someone who's closely related to who's capable of doing this, as opposed to having so many different people doing their own thing. I don't know. That's just how I look at it, but I guess we shall see what happens. So I'll just cut it off right there. Yeah, so that's our discussion of Scream 6 and how we think things will go. Hopefully it sticks to landing. I hope so. But I guess we shall see. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.